begin with excesses, they begin with silence, a silence that lingers far longer than it should for someone so young. This is the story of a woman in her mid-20s, someone life quietly asked to grow up far too soon. She grew up in a family that from the outside seemed stable in its own way. Her father was the one who believed in her future. He encouraged her studies, he spoke about possibilities. He reminded her that she was capable of more than the small town she came from. He was the voice that said softly but firmly, "You can go further." Her mother was different, practical, reserved, emotionally contained. She loved deeply but rarely spoke about feelings, not because she didn't care, but because she had never learned how to put pain into words. She had siblings too. Each of them responded to life differently. Some became quieter, others carried on as though nothing had changed, and she, without even noticing, she tried to be strong for everyone. While still very young, she left home to study in another city. It was a mixture of pride and fear, her first time living away from family, her first real step into independence, and then everything changed. She received the news that her father had died suddenly in a road accident. There was no preparation, no gradual understanding. One moment he existed in her world, and the next he didn't. She couldn't return home immediately, so she grieved alone in a small, unfamiliar room in a city that didn't yet feel like home. Within her family, the loss was rarely spoken about. Her mother needed to carry on, her siblings needed to carry on, and someone had to hold everything together without choosing it. She became that person. At college, she continued attending classes, submitting assignments, sitting quietly in lecture halls. From the outside, she looked functional. Inside, everything felt fractured. She felt disconnected from life. While others talked about relationships, weekends, and future plans, she felt as though part of her own life had quietly stopped moving forward. It was during this time that alcohol entered her life. At first, it seemed harmless: student gatherings, a shared laughter, a drink to blend in, another to relax. Alcohol softened the edges of grief. It made thinking quieter, feeling more distant. Gradually, it stopped being social, it became private. She began drinking alone, in secret, sometimes early in the day, just to make it through. She was still very young and already deeply exhausted. Her relationship with her mother grew more distant. There were no dramatic arguments, only silence. Her mother sensed something was wrong, but didn't know how to reach her, and she didn't know how to ask for help. Her siblings continued living their own lives, each coping differently, and she felt increasingly alone, even when surrounded by people. She had relationships. They often began intensely to then slowly became complicated. And there was affection, but also insecurity, a quiet fear of abandonment, a fear of not being enough. Alcohol sometimes accompanied these moments, helping her feel freer, but also bringing regret. Words spoken too quickly, emotions misunderstood. Little by little, she withdrew from those she loved, not because she didn't care, but because she no longer knew how to carry her own pain. There came a time when sadness felt overwhelming, and days when getting out of bed required effort she didn't have. Moments when life itself felt unbearably heavy. And during one particularly difficult moment, something became clear. Alcohol was always present when she felt at her lowest, never when she felt truly at peace. The realization didn't arrive dramatically, it arrived quietly. Later, at an ordinary gathering, she experienced something unexpected. She laughed, she felt present, she felt genuinely happy. And when she noticed the drink in her hand, a thought appeared. You don't need to be here. Now, that was the beginning of a boundary. Explaining it to others wasn't easy. It's just one drink, you're young, you're overthinking it. But she knew. For her, there was no such thing as just one. She reached out for support, she connected with people who understood. And slowly she realized this wasn't about weakness, it was about pain that had never been given space to heal. Stopping drinking didn't mean stopping life, it meant learning how to live differently. She rediscovered simple pleasures, moments of presence, quiet enjoyment. At first, social events without alcohol felt frightening, then unfamiliar, eventually empowering. Her relationship with her mother began to shift. Slowly, imperfectly, but more honestly, with her siblings came understanding, not perfect but real. The process also brought guilt, shame, and the difficult task of forgiving herself. Asking others for forgiveness was hard. Forgiving herself was harder. Today, she doesn't romanticize her story. She is not defined by alcohol, but she no longer hides her past either. She understands now that learning to feel is not weakness and that asking for help is an act of courage. If you recognize the part of yourself in this story, or perhaps someone you love, know that recognition is not failure, it is awareness. And these stories are shared for reflection and understanding. They are not a substitute for professional support. Sometimes the first step isn't changing everything. Sometimes like it is simply pausing and allowing yourself to be treated with a little more care.